The Indiana Fever had it. A semifinal lead, a shot at history, a chance to silence every critic. And in the span of 9 chaotic, gut-wrenching minutes, they lost everything. No field goals, clanked free throws, mind-numbing turnovers, and worst of all, no answers from the bench. It was a collapse so total, so frustrating. Fans couldn't even be shocked. They were just done. Done with the same conservative play calling. Done with watching stars sit on the bench during crunch time. Done with Stephanie White. And now, so is the franchise.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Just days after that brutal playoff exit, the Fever announced that Sandy Brondello is taking over as head coach, marking the end of a tenure that started with promise and ended in chaos. Because while the scoreboard told one story, the real loss was strategic. The moment Caitlin Clark went down, everything unraveled. The rotations made no sense. Natasha Howard was barely used. Odyssey Sims was iced in key moments. The offense looked like it was being coached in 2005, not 2025. And fans noticed. They didn't just question White's decisions. They questioned her motives. Some even accused her of sabotage, of holding Clark back to protect her system. Was it control? Ego? Fear? Whatever it was, it became clear White's approach didn't just limit the team. It cost them everything. And the front office? They finally acted. Bringing in Brondello is more than a coaching change. It's a course correction. A public admission that Clark is the system. That the old school, stick-to-the-plan mindset doesn't work when you're sitting on the most electrifying talent the league has seen in years. Brondello's history with star guards and adaptable systems makes one thing clear. This team is about to play Clark's game. Because let's face it, this wasn't just about one playoff meltdown. It was a season-long pattern of underutilizing star power, prioritizing outdated schemes, and pretending like this wasn't Clark's team from day one. Now that illusion's gone, the leash is off. The Fever are putting their chips on Clark. Finally. And Stephanie White? Her exit says what fans have been screaming all season. If you can't build around your star, you shouldn't be coaching one. Stephanie White had the game. She had the roster. She had a path to the finals. And she let it slip through her fingers on the biggest stage with the brightest spotlight in a moment that should have defined a comeback season. But instead, it exposed everything wrong with her leadership. The Indiana Fever's semi-final collapse wasn't just heartbreaking. It was self-inflicted. With the chance to silence doubters and prove that this new-look roster could contend without Caitlin Clark on the floor, White coached scared. She coached safe. And in today's WNBA, that's a fast track to failure. 9 full minutes without a field goal. A critical free throw drought. Mind-numbing turnovers. It wasn't just bad basketball. It was the result of a team that had no idea how to respond under pressure. And worse, a coach who had no clue how to adjust. Fans watched as Stephanie White stood on the sidelines and let the momentum drain away like it didn't even matter. She had no counterpunch, no fire, no urgency. That's not just a bad night. That's the definition of unprepared. And it goes deeper than one loss. The questions started long before the final buzzer. Why were key players like Natasha Howard and Odyssey Sims being underutilized when the offense desperately needed rhythm? Why did the rotations feel so stiff, so scripted, so resistant to the flow of the game? And why, above all, did White never show the willingness to adapt the offense, even in the absence of Clark? That's the real issue here. Caitlin Clark, a generational talent, fundamentally changes the way defenses operate. And when she's out, you don't keep running the same stale sets that were already underwhelming with her on the floor. You change, you react, you innovate. But White didn't, and that's why she has to go. Stephanie White's coaching philosophy has consistently leaned on conservative, system-first strategies that don't reflect where the WNBA is going. The league isn't built around evenly distributed shot charts and rigid rotations anymore. It's built around stars, dynamic playmakers, flexibility. And when you have a player like Clark, arguably the most marketable and impactful athlete in the league, You don't bury her in a team-first system that treats her like just another piece. You build around her. Instead, what we saw was a coach more committed to protecting her system than embracing her players. And it backfired big time. Let's call it what it is. Stephanie White's refusal to adapt cost the Fever their shot at a championship. And now, the franchise has a decision to make. Cling to the outdated approach of a coach who's already shown she can't evolve, or bring in someone who actually understands how to maximize elite talent. Enter Sandy Brondello. Brondello is exactly the kind of coach Indiana needs. She's proven. She's flexible. She knows how to manage high-profile players without letting ego or system get in the way. And most importantly, she's a winner. With championship experience and a track record of building around stars, she doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. She just needs to give it the right driver. And that driver is Caitlin Clark. What Brondello brings is exactly what White lacked: tactical boldness and emotional intelligence. She doesn't shrink in big moments. She doesn't get paralyzed by pressure. And she certainly doesn't treat her best player like a liability to her system. She builds offenses around what players can do, not what they should conform to. This is the modern WNBA. Becky Hammon didn't take the Aces to back-to-back titles by running old-school playbooks and ignoring her stars. She embraced them. She empowered them. She knew when to give them the reins. That's what Brondello can do for Indiana. Let's also talk about trust. Under White, Clark's absence during the playoffs was treated with a level of vagueness that fans and analysts couldn't ignore. Was she really not ready to return? Or was the coaching staff playing gatekeeper, hoping to shield the system from her takeover? That kind of speculation shouldn't even exist. But it did, because the trust was already broken. You don't get to be a franchise centerpiece and still be treated like a role player in recovery. Not in this league. Not when you've transformed the Fever from an afterthought into the most talked-about team in the WNBA. And yet, Clark's role has felt oddly minimized, something that's only become more obvious since she was sidelined. The offense didn't evolve. It regressed. It stalled. And when it needed a spark, White turned to everything but innovation. And now the backlash is here. Fans are furious. Analysts are calling it malpractice. The front office? They're on notice. Because if they don't make a move, they risk losing more than just games. They risk losing the faith of the very person they've built their future around. This is why replacing White with Brondello isn't just a smart move. It's a necessary one. The Fever can't afford to play another season under a coach who doesn't recognize that this team begins and ends with Caitlin Clark. Not because she's bigger than the team, but because she is the future of the franchise. If that future is stifled, there won't be a future. Period. Brondello gets that. She's coached MVPs. She's coached in pressure. She knows how to evolve. And most importantly, she respects the value of elite players, not just on the stat sheet, but in how they lead, how they shift culture, and how they inspire the entire league. With Brondello at the helm, Clark finally gets what she's deserved from day one: a system that fits her. A coach who trusts her vision. A team built around her strengths, not her limitations. That's how you build a dynasty. That's how you win. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the Fever losing a playoff game. It's about how they lost it. Slowly, predictably, without urgency, and under a coach who refused to make the tough calls. That can't happen again. So if Indiana wants to take the next step, from playoff hopeful to title threat, they need a coach who knows how to unleash greatness, not manage it. Sandy Brondello is that coach. Stephanie White was not. What do you think? Was Stephanie White the biggest reason for the Fever's collapse? Is Sandy Brondello the missing piece they've needed all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives, player drama, and coaching shakeups from around the league. This season may have ended in heartbreak, but next season, it could be the beginning of something unstoppable. What makes this coaching change even more significant is the timing. The Indiana Fever are not just another rebuilding franchise anymore. They're a team with national relevance. Thanks to Caitlin Clark, they're on every highlight reel, dominating media coverage and attracting a growing fan base that expects results. And that kind of momentum, it doesn't last forever. You either capitalize on it or you squander it. Stephanie White squandered it. She had the tools. She had the league's most talked about rookie. She had a front court full of veterans who've been through wars. But when it came time to put it all together under pressure, she collapsed. The offense turned to mush. The substitutions looked random. The players looked confused. And worst of all, the team looked like it didn't believe in itself. That's not a player problem. That's a coaching problem. And fans saw it. So did the analysts. You could feel the tension build game after game. Rotations that didn't make sense. Crucial minutes handed to players who couldn't deliver, while proven veterans sat on the bench waiting for a role. Stephanie White looked like a coach stuck between two eras, wanting to control everything like it's 2015, but having no answer for the chaos that is the modern WNBA. Meanwhile, the league has already moved forward. Becky Hammond's aces don't wait for the perfect set. They attack. They adapt. They feed their stars and let them lead. Brondello did the same with the Liberty. It's not about coddling superstars. It's about understanding that the game has changed. It rewards aggression. It rewards flexibility. And it demands you let your best players take the wheel. So when Caitlin Clark sat out and the team collapsed, the excuses started. She wasn't ready. We didn't want to rush her. It's about the long term. But no one believed it. Not really. Because the body language said something else. The offense said something else. The lack of energy and urgency that screamed louder than any post-game interview could. There's a reason people started throwing around the word sabotage. And while that's a heavy accusation, the silence from the team didn't help. If you don't explain your strategy, if you don't communicate your decisions clearly, people will fill in the blanks. And what they filled in wasn't flattering. People weren't just mad about the loss. They were mad because it felt avoidable. The playoffs aren't a time for hesitation. They're a time for bold moves. And Stephanie White hesitated. She stuck to a script. She refused to adjust. And when the pressure hit, she folded. This is exactly why Brondello's arrival feels like a lifeline. She's not here to protect the past. She's here to unlock the future. She won't sideline her stars out of caution. She'll ride them until the wheels fall off because that's what it takes to win. It's a mindset shift, and it's one this team desperately needs. Clark didn't come to Indiana to be a cog in a system. She came to lead, to change the franchise, and to win. And you could feel her frustration when that opportunity was ripped away, not by injury, but by coaching indecision. Brondello won't make that mistake. She understands that players like Clark aren't just valuable, they're irreplaceable. You don't work around them. You work through them. And that's what Indiana finally gets with Brondello, a coach who values star power and knows how to use it. Someone who's not afraid to live or die by her best players. Someone who recognizes that building a championship team doesn't mean balancing minutes. It means maximizing moments. The Fever have never been closer to greatness. The pieces are there. Clark is just getting started. Aaliyah Boston continues to evolve into a dominant interior force. The role players are gritty, athletic, and hungry. All they needed was a coach who could tie it all together and push them into contention. They needed someone who wouldn't second-guess their stars, who wouldn't fold under playoff pressure, who wouldn't treat generational talent like a liability. Now they have that. The front office, by making this change, is finally acknowledging the obvious. This is Caitlin Clark's team. The franchise will go as far as she takes them. And in today's WNBA, the smart franchises are the ones who lean into their stars, not away from them. We've seen what happens when you empower young superstars. The Aces built around Aya Wilson, and now they're the team everyone's chasing. The Liberty went all in on Breanna Stewart and built a super team overnight. You can't be timid in this league anymore. You either go all in or you go home. Stephanie White chose caution. Sandy Brondello chooses confidence. That's the difference. And let's be real, Clark's development can't afford another wasted year. You don't bring in one of the most influential players in modern college basketball history and ask her to wait her turn. This isn't a redshirt program. This is the WNBA. The fans didn't show up in record numbers to see Caitlin stand in the corner while a half-court set unfolds. They came to watch her dominate. Now she'll finally get that chance. Brondello's system is fast, free-flowing, and star-driven. It thrives on pick-and-roll creativity, floor spacing, and empowering guards to make real-time decisions. It's not perfect, but it's modern. It fits Clark's strengths like a glove. And if the Fever fully embrace this new identity, they won't just be better, they'll be dangerous. And if you're a Fever fan, that's what you've been waiting for. A coach who sees the full picture. A front office willing to make the tough call. A franchise that finally says, we're done settling. Sandy Brondello isn't just a new hire. She's a declaration that the Indiana Fever are no longer interested in potential. They want rings. And with Caitlin Clark leading the way, and Brondello finally giving her the freedom to fly, they just might get one. And now comes the real test. Not for Brondello, not even for Clark, but for the entire Indiana Fever organization. Are they really ready to compete in the new WNBA? Because hiring Sandy Brondello is just the first step. The next step? Letting her actually take control. This isn't just about giving her the clipboard. It's about giving her the freedom to rewire the culture from top to bottom. No more front office interference. No more hiding behind cautious player timelines or safe rotations. No more pretending this team is still developing. That window slammed shut the second Clark was drafted. The Fever have to accept what they are now, a win-now team with a superstar who isn't going to wait around for someone's coaching philosophy to catch up with reality. Let's not forget, Brondello has handled locker rooms with big egos, big stakes, and bigger expectations. She's not going to be overwhelmed by national media attention or viral headlines. In fact, she knows how to use them. She's media savvy, tactically sharp, and doesn't flinch in postseason play. The exact opposite of what we just witnessed from Stephanie White. And that's what separates coaches who talk about winning from coaches who actually deliver. Now, to be fair, Stephanie White wasn't coaching an easy team. The Fever were rebuilding for years before Clark arrived. There was a culture of mediocrity baked into the foundation. But when you get a player like Clark, you don't get to make excuses anymore. The bar gets raised overnight, and you either rise with it or you get out of the way. White didn't rise. She coasted. And when the pressure hit in the playoffs, she cracked like a cheap windshield. And the players noticed. You could see in their body language during timeouts. You could feel the confusion in the rotations. And you definitely heard it in the post-game pressers. Vague comments, coded language, and a lot of we need to do better without ever saying how. It felt like the team was stuck in a holding pattern while the rest of the league kept flying forward. The Aces didn't wait for perfection. They trusted their stars. They trusted Becky. And they ran the Fever out of the building when it mattered most. And here's the cold, uncomfortable truth. Clark might not have saved them even if she had played. Because under White's system, she wasn't being used to her full potential anyway. That's why her absence during the semifinal series felt more like a scapegoat than a real factor. If you weren't building the system around her when she was healthy, then missing her shouldn't have suddenly been the reason you fell apart. But with Brondello, that story changes. The second Clark steps back on the floor, she becomes the heartbeat of the offense. She won't just be a piece of the puzzle. She'll be the system. Just like Diana Taurasi was in Phoenix. Just like Sue Bird was in Seattle. Just like Sabrina Ionescu is now in New York. Because that's how you win titles in today's WNBA. You don't win by balancing out the offense across 5 average contributors. You win by leaning into your star, putting the ball in her hands, and letting her dictate the pace. If Indiana wants to win now, they need to embrace that model. And by bringing in Brondello, they're finally moving in that direction. But it won't be easy. Brondello walks into a locker room that's still bruised from a postseason collapse, still haunted by internal friction, and still adjusting to being under a national microscope every single night. She'll need to rebuild trust, re-energize the veterans, and, most importantly, empower Clark to lead without hesitation. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Caitlin Clark has been walking a tightrope all season, between being the league's biggest draw and being treated like just another rookie, between leading the team in scoring and barely being acknowledged in the game plan, between carrying the franchise's future and being micromanaged at every turn. With Brondello, that stops. She won't suppress leadership just because it's coming from a young player. She knows that greatness doesn't care about age. It only cares about opportunity. And Clark, she's ready for that opportunity. She's been the most scrutinized, criticized, and dissected player in the league since her arrival. And still, she shows up. Still, she leads. Still, she competes. If anything, the semifinal disaster only makes her more dangerous heading into next season. Because now, she's got something to prove and a coach who actually believes in letting her prove it. That combination should terrify the rest of the league. Because the truth is, the Fever aren't far off. They have the pieces. The roster is young but talented. The front court is solid. The shooters are streaky but capable. What they were missing was belief, cohesion, vision, and Stephanie White couldn't give them that. Sandy Brondello can. She understands how to manage stars without coddling them. She knows how to develop chemistry without suffocating spontaneity. And most importantly, she understands that in a league driven by speed, space, and shot creation, you need a coach who knows how to let go of the reins, not tighten them. This isn't a time for rebuilding. This is the moment for ascension. And if the Fever get this right, they won't just make the playoffs next year. They'll be a threat, a legitimate contender. Because now, Clark won't be playing with one eye over her shoulder. She'll be unleashed, fully. So yes, it took a meltdown to force the change. It took an embarrassing playoff exit to finally ask the hard questions. But if this ends with Brondello and Clark building something real, then it'll have been worth it. Let's be honest, coaches come and go in this league. But moments like this, they're rare. A coach with pedigree meets a player with generational talent. A franchise desperate for change finally decides to evolve. That's how dynasties begin. The only question now is, will Indiana embrace it? Will they let go of the past, lean into the chaos, and give Brondello the space to build something special? We'll find out soon enough. But one thing is clear, Stephanie White was never going to get them there. She had her chance. She played it safe, and she lost everything. Sandy Brondello isn't here to play it safe. She's here to win, and if Indiana lets her, she just might. So, Fever fans, what's your take? Is Brondello the right choice? Did the franchise wait too long to pull the trigger on Stephanie White? And most importantly, will Caitlin Clark finally be unleashed under a coach who actually gets it? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're ready for the full behind-the-scenes breakdowns, locker room drama, and all the coaching chaos coming in the offseason, make sure to subscribe. Because if this season was messy, next season, it's about to get historic.